We have lots of NHL news and rumors to take a look at tonight, including the latest on Sidney Crosby. One Pittsburgh article suggests it might be time to be concerned, and we'll review the article and discuss where things are at and what we know on that situation. Plus, the hockey news has linked young Russian goalie Yaroslav Askarov to 5 NHL teams. We'll discuss some possibilities of where he might end up. Plus, the Canucks are reportedly looking on the goalie market due to some injury concerns. Lots of updates today in the world of coaching in regards to the Four Nation Face-Off, as well as the Canucks and Rangers making some announcements today that impact their staff. Plus, we have signings in Toronto and Columbus, and more news from the waiver wire regarding Ryan Johansen. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, there's lots of news and some rumors to take a look at today. We have another jam-packed video with lots of things to cover here in today's video, recapping today's NHL news. So let's get started first with news from the NHL waiver wire. Now, this will not surprise anybody, but we talked about here in the last day or so about Ryan Johansen being placed on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination with the Philadelphia Flyers. Well, he's now cleared that process, so he's cleared, and the Flyers can officially terminate the contract. Now, as we mentioned, when that news first broke, plus we saw the statement from the agent of Ryan Johansen, Kurt Overhart, there is definitely going to be a fight regarding this. They are definitely going to be grieving this through the NHLPA. So we'll see. The waiver process is over. They can proceed if they wish, but Johansen's definitely going to be fighting it. Of course, as we talked about last night, Johansen does apparently have a big surgery that's booked and upcoming. We don't know the full details on what exactly he's having done, but he and his agent still insist that the injury that they're claiming is legit, requires surgery, and is going to have him out recovering for some time, so that he didn't deserve to be terminated. So we'll see where this goes, but for now, the waiver process is over. Lots of coaching updates today, plus we have some signings to take a look at. In the world of coaching, we have some announcements from USA Hockey. We know Mike Sullivan was going to be the head coach of Team USA at the upcoming Four Nation Face-Off tournament coming up this February. Well, we now know who's going to be on his staff. No big surprise, lots of experience here, but John Tortorella, Torts, will be on his staff as an assistant coach. The Flyers bench boss will be there, and David Quinn as well will be on his staff. Of course, Quinn now works with Sullivan in Pittsburgh. So they will be the assistant coaches for Mike Sullivan at that event. Some other coaching news around the NHL, and both of these pieces of news were somewhat surprising. The New York Rangers, though, have announced today that longtime goalie coach Benoit Allred is stepping away from his role and will not be participating in like day-to-day activities. He's still going to remain with the organization in some capacity, but they're going to have a new goalie coach now, which will be Jeff Malcolm. Obviously, Benoit Allred's very highly regarded as one of the best goalie coaches around the NHL, so that's certainly not great news. I mean, obviously, over time, everybody has their time when they move on, but he's been such a well-respected goaltending coach there in New York for a long time, so that's certainly not great news for them, but at least he's still going to be affiliated with the organization if they need consulting or whatnot. So that's surprising news on that front. And in Vancouver, we also got some surprising news that their goalie coach, who was also the director of goaltending, Ian Clark, he's requested for the Canucks to reassign him to a new position, and he wants to step away from that role, which is also odd timing. It just, it's weird considering it's the middle of August to get coaching news like that. It just seems a little bit odd. The press release from the Canucks on this situation did indicate that Clark wouldn't be able to go on the ice anymore. Obviously dealing with some health issues, injury stuff. So, I guess it kind of makes sense. It's just normally the coaching staff stuff is done well earlier than this. So it's just a little surprising on the timing of it. But Clark's been asked to be reassigned, so he's now going to be a goaltending scout and a goaltending development coach. So he'll still work with goalies within the organization, just in a completely different capacity. Marco Terenius, who was basically his his number two, I guess, in that department, who worked a lot with Abbotsford and kind of double duty a little bit with Vancouver as well, will take over for him, and now they're working to replace him to get a new goalie coach to work strictly with the Abbotsford goalies in the American Hockey Leagues. Staying with Vancouver, we'll jump into a rumor involving the Canucks as well. Lots of speculation from Rick Dhaliwal, who very well connected with this team. Elliot Friedman's made mention of this as well, that the Canucks are kind of sniffing around, scouring the goaltending market. Now, this could come as a signing for anything that's remaining on the UFA market. It could come as maybe a small trade to add some more depth to the position, but there is some concern around Thatcher Demko. Now, of course, we know in the playoffs, Demko was injured. We heard that, if they were moving forward and going deeper in the playoffs, there was a chance he could have come back, but he's still not ready to go. So it goes to show you that the injury he suffered was pretty serious, and if he had played, I just honestly wonder, really, would he have played, or like what kind of shape or condition would he have been in? Makes you wonder. But there is definitely some concerns around Demko, that he may not be ready for the start of NHL training camp. There's some that say maybe not for the start of the season, although that is not confirmed. And those who have been talking about it, like Dhaliwal and Friedman, seem to have a little bit more optimism that he could still possibly be ready for the start of the year. Just because he's not ready at the start of camp doesn't mean he won't be ready to start the season. But it's generally, you have to be there for part of camp, otherwise you're probably not going to be ready. So we will see where that goes. That leaves Artur Silovs. I mean, obviously, Silovs played well in the playoffs. He could probably handle the starting duties for the first little bit of the season if need be. But they certainly would want to add some much more depth there. I mean, obviously, Casey DeSmith no longer in the organization. So they're looking around for a good number three who might have to become a number two for a short time to start the year. I mean, there is a few veterans still in the market. I know, like Marty Jones comes to mind, who's not signed yet. And there's still some teams as well that do have multiple goalies that could move somebody. I don't think the Canucks would want to. If they do it via trade, I don't think it's going to be something they want to spend a lot of assets on. It's going to obviously be somebody that's, kind of a decent backup that they can get for a real cheap price. So I'm not really sure, looking around the league, exactly who they could target in that front. Like I said, there is a few that are still kind of on the UFA market that they might consider. But either way, they have concerns with their goaltending depth. Demko seems like he's not going to be ready for start of camp, maybe the start of the year, and we'll see if they make a move. So don't be surprised if that comes down here in the next days or weeks leading before camp. A few signings today. We got the Toronto Maple Leafs have signed Alex Steeves. He gets a 1-year, 2-way contract. It's a very lucrative 2-way deal. League minimum of $775 at the NHL level, but it comes with a $350,000 salary in the American Hockey League. So clearly Alex Steeves is somebody that I would imagine will have a shot at playing at least some NHL games. Hard to imagine him being an NHL regular, but he has proven at times to be good for short-term fill-in. I would suspect, like I said, he'll be a call-up option and get a few games here and there. But at least, he makes the Marlies better and obviously get him a lucrative contract at that level to kind of entice him to stick around, I guess. And the Columbus Blue Jackets today come to terms with restricted free agent centerman Cole Sillinger. So their now internal business is finally wrapped up. They had a lot of RFA youngsters this year. Sillinger's the last to sign. They've already, Marchenko and Johnson and Chinnikov and all these other guys are all looked after. Sillinger's now done. He gets a 2-year deal, $2.25 million. Of course, he was the 12th overall pick in 2021. He's played a lot for a young man in his NHL career. 220 games already under his belt with 74 points to his credit. So he's had a pretty decent start to his career. This is a pretty good bridge deal. I think Sillinger projects to be a pretty decent centerman for Columbus long term. So pretty good contract overall. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of other rumors to take a look at here today. I want to take a look at Yaroslav Askarov, who's certainly grabbing a lot of the headlines, a lot of the chatter around the NHL rumor mill right now, after the news was broken by Kevin Weeks that not only would he prefer a trade, but he has requested it, and he definitely wants out of Nashville. He does not want to report to the American Hockey League and has made it clear to them that he is not going to do so if that's what they expect of him this year. And clearly, after extending UC Saros on a mega 8-year deal and then bringing in Scott Wedgwood as a much higher paid backup goalie, I just don't see it happen. I mean, Baird Trotz said he expects him to come to camp and fight for a job, and I get that. That's the job of every prospect. But when you have these kind of contracts in front of you, you're not just going to, put that on waivers and, you can't expect them to come in and fail. Otherwise, it makes you look like you signed a dud, right? Askarov is boxed out of an NHL job. Some think he's ready. I've seen others have concerns. The biggest, most concern that I've seen kind of come from the more higher pressured games in the playoffs. His regular season numbers the last 2 years have actually been very good. It just seems like a couple of times now in the playoffs, his game has taken a step back and he's lost the net. So you want to see these high-ranked, high-drafted players be able to handle the big-time pressure. And so far, this pressure at the AHL level has gotten to him. So that is the concern. So that's why some think he's not NHL ready. But he is definitely one of the best goalie prospects, not in the NHL. That we can say with certainty. Not all these top prospects work out either. Just because he's classified as that today does not mean he's going to be a superstar tomorrow or in the immediate future. However, there was an interesting article I came across today from the Hockey News linking him to 5 teams. Some of these teams we've already kind of heard about, and they all kind of make sense for different reasons. But essentially, they've listed Chicago, Montreal, Toronto, San Jose, and Utah as being the 5 teams they felt made the most sense to acquire his services. Obviously, for the most part, that they obviously don't have deep goaltending and that he would be making them better. Chicago is the prime example of that they have Mrazek and Brossois. But if you had an opportunity to acquire Askarov, you probably could move one of those guys and get a decent return for him. Lots of teams looking for goaltending help. Now, with the contracts they have, that might be a little bit tougher, but certainly Chicago does not have a clear-cut goalie of the future. They've been able to acquire a decent prospect pool so far during a rebuild the past few years, but he would certainly be a great piece to add. Makes a ton of sense. The same goes for the Sharks. Now, the suggestion for San Jose, somebody that they might be able to offer to Nashville, would be Fabian Zetterlund. Zetterlund's being able to do pretty well in San Jose since coming over from New Jersey in that Timo Meier trade. He'd probably love an opportunity to get back to a more competitive team. Might be an interesting guy. Of course, the Nashville Predators do have a pretty deep forward group, but they have made it clear they don't want a goalie in return. They want a younger, ideally prospect, either prospect or early in his career established forward or defenseman. So Zetterlund is maybe not the prototypical guy they would want. Probably a little bit older, but they're not going to want to give up your Celebrinis, your Smiths, some of your top guys here. Dickinson, they're not going to be available, right? So if they're going to get the deal done, that would probably be one of their better chances to intrigue them. Of course, in Montreal's case, again, the author here feels like he could be an upgrade over maybe Primo, and maybe you run with a tandem of Montembeault and Askarov for a few years while Askarov kind of becomes the number one eventually. Obviously, Montreal's a very deep prospect pool. We've seen them use Jordan Harris to get Patrick Laine. They could do the same sort of thing here with this type of trade. They have some forwards that they might be able to part with, as they grow the younger established forwards. Look at the wingers and centermen that they're starting to accumulate here. Guys like Mesar or maybe even Owen Beck might become expendable if you can get yourself a stud goalie. Of course, then there's still more than enough defensemen. Would they consider, I would think probably Lane Hudson, David Reinbacher, probably off limits. Gooley just signed a longer-term deal. You've got Jacky just signed a couple of years. Whether it be Struble or Mailloux or one of these other guys might be one of the guys that they might be willing to part with. So that might intrigue them to make a move on that front. Toronto, Joseph Wall and Anthony Stolarz could prove to be a good tandem, but they both got a lot of injury history. Neither has played a big workload. So if I'm Toronto, I do have some concerns. That Nick Robertson wants out. He could be a trade piece. Timothy Liljegren's name has been out there as well. And I guess the one of the bigger reasons around Liljegren is the fact that, he signed a $3 million contract. They signed him for 2 years, $3 million. And if he turns out to be a third pair defenseman, that's too much money, especially on a team that's so top heavy with their forwards, to be making that kind of money as a third pair guy. Now, they signed him to that contract. They didn't need to do that. Of course, they could have made a trade earlier. But I guess the feeling is that a younger right shot defenseman who would come in on a cheap ELC like a Topi Niemela might be ready to take that spot. So if he's ready and has a good camp, then Liljegren becomes more extendable, and some kind of package of Liljegren Robertson might be enough to lure Nashville to move Askarov. Now, of course, like I said, short term, maybe they carry 3 goalies. I'm not sure how they handle things. They're not going to want to move Wall. Obviously, he's got a 3-year deal. Stolar's signed for a couple of years. Maybe Stolar's becomes expendable. I'm not sure how they go about carrying 3 goalies for a little bit, because clearly Askarov doesn't want to go to the minors. But an interesting thought there. Utah was the other team. Karel Vejmelka could be expendable. Obviously not to Nashville, but somewhere else. You could have a tandem of Ingram and Askarov. Could be a great 1-2 punch for Utah. We know that they're obviously spending a lot more money than when they were in Arizona. They've been wanting to make a big splash. They've done that so far, and they could continue to do so. Could be a great way to make an acquisition. Maybe some of the defensemen they've drafted in the past couple of years could be intriguing to Nashville, either like a Maverick Lamoureux or maybe like a Danil Boo. One of those guys for prospects might be an intriguing offer. So that's what the article suggests. Hard to say where's the best fit or what happens with Askarov, but to some degree, all those teams do make sense. I have to think, though, that obviously teams like Chicago, San Jose probably make them the most sense, but teams like Montreal, Toronto would actually have some intriguing offers. But hard to say where he ends up. Let me know what you think. And down in the comments, we'll discuss that a little bit further. Obviously, some other speculation around the NHL today. Of course, we talked about Askarov. Some speculation about Detroit and their RFAs. There's still a lot of RFAs unsigned. I've seen one rumor, which is tough to validate, but, some are speculating that, there's teams looking at Lucas Raymond as a potential offer sheet candidate. Can't verify that 100%. A lot of RFAs, really, if you think about it, would make great offer sheet candidates, but certainly, the longer players go unsigned, like what happened with Edmonton, it's more likely. But a guy like Raymond is going to come in on a much more expensive deal. The only way he's going to consider an offer sheet is if you're paying him, it's going to have to be probably $8 million or more. And I would think Detroit would probably be, at this point, willing to go close to 8, at least 7. I'm not sure what they're offering him right now. But yeah, could they force their hand? I don't think they would go near Seider, because I think Seider would probably be the first to, if they could only match one, I think Seider would be picked. But they should have ample space to get both guys done, which is surprising as to why it's not done. So again, we can't say with any certainty that he's going to be targeted, but I did see some speculation on that. Again, if somebody would have told me that the Oilers were going to be targeted, because we had heard that, I didn't know how serious it was before it happened, or really that it was likely. Just some intriguing thoughts. And as teams watch these offer sheets become more successful, maybe we'll see more of them. The last 3 offer sheets now have worked. The 2 in St. Louis, the last one before that was Kotkaniemi a couple of years back. Maybe teams will start getting more brave and use them more. The other big thing I want to talk about today, as well as the future of Sidney Crosby in Pittsburgh. Of course, we've talked about this periodically. Until he signs, there's bound to be speculation. I came across an article today from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Reporter Jason Mackey talking about the fact that there's a weird amount of silence around this, and wondering if it's time to be concerned. Is it time to be worried about the, one of the greatest Pittsburgh athletes, and obviously greatest hockey player the team has seen in a long time, outside of Muriel Lemieux. Of course, no offense to Malkin and Letang, but Crosby's been the best of the bunch for a long, long time. There's definitely, they've got their well-respected, long-term, tenured players there as well. Don't get me wrong, but there's no doubt they aren't what they were without Crosby. And everybody knows that. He'll have a statue outside of the building someday. He's going to be a Pittsburgh legend for the rest of his life, regardless of what happens here. But, the longer this goes, you just think this should be such an easy deal, right? A lot of people, we heard July 1, it should be a slam dunk. Dubas will go to Crosby and be like, here, 3 times 10, here you go. Okay, that sounds good. Doesn't happen, right? You hear, okay, well, July 1's such a hectic day. don't be shocked if it takes a week, 10 days into July. Maybe it happens then. Doesn't happen. We get into later July, then there start to be speculation. Well, we know how superstitious Crosby is. Maybe it's agreed to, and they're going to announce it on his birthday, 8/7. Well, that comes and goes. Nothing. His birthday was 2 weeks ago now. Nothing. And it's like radio silent. So as Jason Mackey talks about in this article, he says, like, his quote here was that there's a weird amount of silence surrounding the Crosby situation. He says, clearly a week ago, Kyle Dubas was busy making trades with the St. Louis Blues, with getting them the draft pick back to do those offer sheets. So it's not like he's not working. Obviously, they've made announcements for a ton of changes to their hockey ops department. So he's clearly getting stuff done. How about getting to work on Crosby? And it may not be that he's not. Like, you got to remember, it takes two sides. So as he goes on to say, obviously, I'm sure, like a lot of people that are, reporters and fans of the team, they want to see get this done so the speculation can end. But at the same time, you'd have, like he says, you have to think if Sid calls Dubas and says, okay, Kyle, let's get this done. I want to get this off our plates for the rest of the summer so I can chill and just not focus on training here, not even have to think about this anymore. You think one call from Sid and it'd be like, okay, yep, no problem. It should be easy to do, right? Give me this. Okay, where do I sign? Or the same thing if Dubas calls Sid and says, okay, Sid, like, we should get this done. We're going to give you everything you want. You would think both sides would be like, all right, done deal, let's get it signed. And it's not the case. So the longer that goes, like he says, which makes, I agree with him, the sentiment here, is that the longer that goes, you start to think that there's one side that doesn't want to dance. But the problem is they can't figure out what side it is. Is it the team not giving him what he wants? Is it Crosby not either agreeing to what they're offering? Is it a case of Crosby not knowing what he wants? We've heard some speculation early, but it was a long time ago. It was probably 4, 5, 6 weeks ago now, that Crosby was unsure how long he wanted to commit to the Penguins. He wanted to make sure that he did not put them in a bad spot cap space-wise, which to me, I don't understand that, and I didn't completely buy that. And I do see Sid being the optimal team guy and wanting to be worried about that to some degree, because he wants to make sure they can have a strongest team possible and have enough money to spend on other players. But as far as leaving them, so like, if he decides, I don't want to play, well, you up and retire, your contract comes off the cap. So there's that. But is he going to want to do that? Probably not. Nobody wants to give up money that they're owed, right? So his contract, as long as he plays like he did last year, he's not slowing down. It would be completely tradable. I don't think it'd be a scenario where he would leave them in a bad spot. So I'm not really completely sure I buy that. At the same time, I can see him saying he doesn't know how long he wants to play and doesn't want to overcommit. Okay, that kind of makes sense, but it's been a long stretch here. Now, there's no pressure points. There's no rush. But it's really just, an unusual set of circumstances for such a top-notch player to not get something done so quickly. Now, like in Edmonton and Leon Draisaitl, there's been so much change with that team. New GM being hired late in the offseason. They had the Offer-Sheet situation. It's no wonder Leon's contract extension is not done. And there's a lot more there that makes sense. Whereas with Crosby's, it's been so quiet. And it's not like Dubas has been out there just on fire, making move after move after move after move, and Crosby's kind of sitting back just waiting. That's not the case. So should we be worried? Is he on to something here? Is the silence sometimes says more than words themselves? Let me know what you think, and we'll talk about it further in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.